You're listening to CoachingCues podcast, where experts all around the world answer your most burning questions surrounding the wide topic of strength training. Every week we tackle the what, the why, and the how of one specific topic in just 15 minutes. Straight to the point, no fluff. So, without further ado, let's get straight into this week's episode.
So my name is Eric Helms. I'm a research fellow at the Sports Performance Research Institute New Zealand here at the Auckland University of Technology, where I specifically conduct research and mentor masters and Ph.D. students who are researching physique sport and strength sports science. So this is something I'm very passionate about. I compete in natural bodybuilding, I compete in raw powerlifting, and I've been coaching raw powerlifters and natural bodybuilders since 2009 when I helped form 3D Muscle Journey, along with my colleagues Alberto Nunez, Brad Loomis, and Jeff Alberts. They are still coaches, primarily full-time, at 3D Muscle Journey, where they work with natural bodybuilders and powerlifters, and I've transitioned into doing a little less coaching, and as I've engaged in academia and I've gotten into research, I've become the chief science advisor. So it's my job to make sure that we're up to date with evidence-based practice. So I do some coaching, and I also still compete, and I've got a lot of experience over the years working with athletes, but what I do now is I test theory, I run applied studies, and I help other students get involved in academia and pursue their own PhDs. And I'm heavily interested in what are the ways that we can optimize performance, improve outcomes in sport, but also increase longevity and sustainability in sport so that athletes can have long, productive, enjoyable careers in their sport of choice. So the question today is, what is RPE/RIR? What can it accomplish, and how do we use it? Now, this is actually something that I've talked a lot about in my career, as I actually did my PhD on this topic. The title of my PhD that I did here at AUT, that I started back in 2013 and finished in 2017, is using the repetitions in reserve based RPE scale to autoregulate powerlifting training. So this is something I've probably talked about more than anyone could ever hope to listen to or want to listen to. So we're going to try to break it down for you in just 10 to 20 minutes so you understand what it is. So very straightforward, RPE stands for rating of perceived exertion, and RIR stands for repetitions in reserve. So very simply, a rating of perceived exertion is a scale that you say and you use to rate how hard you felt like you trained. The original RPE scale that was introduced in 1970 by Gunnar Borg is called the Borg Scale, and the Borg Scale was 6 to 20. That might seem like a strange numerical score. How hard was that? Was that a 6? Was that a 20? Somewhere in between? You might be thinking, why would it be in that range? Well, it was originally used for incremental aerobic tests and for aerobic training, and it was meant to be a rough proxy for heart rate. So 6 being a proxy for 60, or resting heart rate roughly for many people, and 20 being a proxy for 200, maximal heart rate for many people. So that's why it was originally conceptualized. But over the last 50 plus years, it's taken on new forms, it's been validated in new ways, and different scales have come out. And we saw the 1 to 10 scale that Borg produced, the CR scale, the category ratio scale, come out in the 80s. We eventually saw picture-based scales when you use them with children or people who don't necessarily have the same ability to read a scale that others might. So we can use this in various populations, clinical, different ages, different levels of education. And we also now have the new RIR-based RPE scale. Now, this actually appeared in use in the powerlifting community before it actually ever was in the peer-reviewed record. So you may be familiar with the name Mike Tuchscherer. So Mike Tuchscherer is a legend in the powerlifting game. He's one of the few American men from the USAPL who's won gold in the World Games, which is the highest honors you can get in the sport of powerlifting. He also transitioned from single-ply powerlifting, which was the dominant form of powerlifting up until around 2012, into raw powerlifting, not using any equipment. And he went on to become a multi-time USAPL national champion and also world champion in raw lifting. So he is an iconic figure, not only as an athlete, but also as a thinker. So something that he produced right around 2008 was what's called the Reactive Training Manual. And Reactive Training Systems is still a dominant voice that helps to educate powerlifting coaches, powerlifters, and to give athletes tools to better individualize their training. And at the time when it first came out in 2008, the Reactive Training Manual taught people how to individualize training load, how much weight they put on the bar. And this was based on reconceiving the Borg Rpe scale instead of using subjective terminology like hard, very hard, or maximal effort, and actually applying what's called repetitions in reserve. So instead of 10 just being maximal effort, 10 meant maximal effort, meaning the most you could lift for the given number of reps you did, and at the end of that set, you could have not done another repetition, you could have not added any more load and successfully completed the set. And a 9 RPE meant I could have done one more repetition. An 8 RPE meant I could have done 2 more repetitions. And 7, I could have done 3. So essentially, he took the concept of RPE, which has been used for, like I said, more than 50 years in exercise science research, as a cheap, cost-effective, and accurate way of assessing the difficulty of exercise subjectively, which happens to be validated against things like heart rate, lactate response, total volume, volume load, and various other metrics by which we can track objectively the difficulty or the total work that someone has done. And he's taken it and translated it into something that's more specific to powerlifting. In the sport of powerlifting, you have 3 chances to lift the heaviest load possible on a squat, bench, and deadlift. So powerlifters are actually very good at gauging how much do I have left in the tank. And that's essentially what the original terminology was all based around. Before the scale actually came out, people would often talk in the late 90s and the early 2000s about, I did a triple and I had 2 more in the tank. And that just essentially became actually categorized and given quantitative numbers behind it in this form of the RPE scale. And it became a very popular way to train over the next few years. And RTS athletes were the first who pioneered programs where instead of programming with a percentage of 1RM, or instead of just simply training to failure, they would program in such ways like, hey, I want you to do 2 reps at an 8 RPE. Meaning, I want you to do 2 reps with 2 RIR, or 2 reps with 2 reps left in the tank. Or another way to think of it, I want you to do 2 reps with your 4 rep max. The reason why this caught fire and became intuitively a good idea to most lifters is that they understood that on any given day, their strength could vary. The amount of food they ate on that day, how much sleep they got, how their program has been, whether they're training more or less specifically, the amount of life stress they were under. These are all things that lifters knew intuitively could impact their maximal strength capacity on any given day, and that we also have research to back that these things do impact fluctuations in strength. Furthermore, the whole concept of programming your training with a percentage of 1RM is based on the idea that the max that you tested 4, 5, 6, sometimes even 8 weeks ago, depending on how long the program was, is still valid today when you step in the gym. However, the goal of these programs is to get stronger. So if you are 6 weeks into a program and you're doing 3 sets of 5 with 80% of your 1RM, that's not your 1RM today. That's the 1RM you had at the start of this program when you tested. So that means you essentially have to guess what is an appropriate percentage of that old 1RM that's going to give me an adequate stimulus today, and not give me too much of a stimulus or too little, because I have to assume how much strength I will have gained from this program, and I have to guess how much fluctuation is there going to be in my strength on a day-to-day basis. So not only is strength actually change, that's the whole goal of lifting, is to get stronger, but fatigue changes on a day-to-day basis, and this results in a factor that is not essentially fixed. While we hope that strength will go up in a linear fashion, it doesn't necessarily, and we can't predict exactly how much fatigue there's going to be. So if on any given day, our strength might be plus or minus 5% of what we expect, using a tool like RPE allows the lifter, and like I said, powerlifters have actually demonstrated they're quite good at guessing at what their strength is prospectively. It allows them to adjust their load on a day-to-day basis to put the right load on the bar for their capacities on that day. So instead of having an easy day, which might be 3 sets of 5 at 70%, it might be 3 sets of 5 at a 6 RPE. And instead of having a hard day, 3 by 5 at 80%, it might be 3 by 5 at an 8 RPE. This allows the lifter to adjust load set to set, to look at their logbook and see how things were going and pick a load on a given day. And essentially, it also builds the skill of thinking about, how much do I have left in me? And this not only helps with better autoregulation of load selection in the short term, but will also pay off in the long term as a lifter who's competing in the sport of guessing how strong you are on any given day based on performance, and getting better and better at that because of thinking about it year round. Now, the research to date has found that RPE can be affected by a number of factors. The ability to accurately gauge how many reps in reserve do I have is impacted by how long you've been training. So novice lifters are far less accurate at gauging their proximity to failure when they stop short compared to experienced lifters. And this has been tested by doing sets where the person actually calls out an RIR or RPE value mid-set. So for example, we might put a given load on the bar, and the participant in the study does as many reps as they can until they reach failure with the spotters around them ensuring safety. And when they think they can do 5 more reps, 3 more reps, and 1 more rep, they call out a 5, a 7, and a 9 RPE. And then we can see, well, compared to when you actually hit failure, how close were you? So what is your predicted repetitions in reserve versus your actual repetitions in reserve? And this prediction is based on a number of things. Like I said, novice lifters tend to be less accurate than experienced lifters. Also, heavier loads tend to be more accurate than lighter loads. Why is that? Well, very simply, when you lift heavy, you can do less reps, so you're starting closer to failure. So you're able to make a better prediction because you're very close already to the point when you're going to predict where that stop is going to occur. So in fact, when we have done studies on trained lifters using the squat, bench, and the deadlift, and doing as many reps as they can at 80% of 1RM, the average prediction in trained lifters is less than 1 rep of error. Meaning if you're a trained lifter, if you're doing a compound movement that you've experience with, and you're lifting moderately heavy loads or higher, RPE can be a great tool to gauge how far you are from failure and to auto-regulate your load selection on a day-to-day basis. However, if you're using a lower load, we've seen that the more reps you do in a set, the less accurate your prediction's going to be. In a 20 rep set, when you think you have 5 more reps, you're probably greatly under-predicting how many more reps you can do, because you're so far from failure that you simply can't tell if your performance has started to go down. So novices and high rep sets are probably not the ideal situation to be using RPE. We know that trained lifters get more accurate with more experience training to failure with gauging where failure is, and we know that heavy lifting, which already puts you closer to failure, are 2 essential key elements to making RPE more accurate. So the take home here is if you want to better match your load with your strength capacities on any given day, gauging RIR or RPE based on RIR is a useful tool that you can have in your toolbox. However, you should probably have some experience with lifting, and you probably want to do this only when you're lifting in, say, the single digit or maybe no more than 10 rep range so that you can have accurate predictions of how close to failure you are.
Thank you for listening to CoachingCues podcast. If you would like your question to be answered by an expert, please head to coachingcues.org/ask. See you next week.